Okay. And then I'm going to
There we go.
okay, and let's get started with this. So we're pinning. Okay. Good.
We good?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Faith Plus Works, the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Orange, New Jersey. I am Darcy Hall, the president of Faith Plus Works. It's so nice to see all of you here this afternoon. Here at Faith and Works, we carry on the work of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Essex County, which was founded in 1895. In addition to Faith Plus Works, our mission in the heart of in addition to Faith Plus Works, our campus in the heart of Orange is the home of the Hub, a mission-driven community space, and the University of Orange, a Free People's University. Frank, would you like to light the chalice?
Would be happy to. This afternoon's opening words come from Shane Claiborne, an American author and activist. Violence is contagious. Violence begets violence. Pick up the sword and die by the sword. You kill us and we'll kill you. There is a contagion of violence in the world, and it's spreading like a disease. But grace is also contagious. An act of kindness inspires another act of kindness. A single act of forgiveness can feel like it heals the world. Grace begets grace. Love rubs off on those who are loved. There's nowhere you can see the battle of grace and disgrace waged more vehemently than in the criminal justice system. When it comes to words like justice, people can say the same thing and mean something completely different. Capital punishment offers one version of justice. There is a sensibility to it. Evil should not go without consequence, and there is a theology behind it, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Yet grace offers us another version of justice. Grace makes room for justice that is restorative and dedicated to healing the wounds of injustice. But the grace thing is hard work. It takes faith, because it dares us to believe that not only can victims be healed, but so can the victimizers. It is not always easy to believe that love is more powerful than hatred, life more powerful than death, and that people can be better than the worst things that they've done. These two versions of justice compete for our allegiance. One leads to death. The other can lead to life and to healing and redemption and other beautiful things.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Those were very powerful words.
Okay, so you're going to introduce one.
So I would like to welcome and introduce our guest today, Robert Fullilove. He is a professor of socio-medical sciences at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center and associate dean of community and minority affairs at the Mailman School of Public Health. His career in public health began in 1986 when he and Mindy Fullilove were founding members of the Center for AIDS Prevention Studies at the University of California, San Francisco. He has worked extensively as a researcher, educator, and policy analyst to eliminate racial ethnic health disparities. He is also the senior advisor for public health programs at the Bard Prison Initiative and has been teaching public health courses in 6 New York State prisons since 2010. He is a veteran of the civil rights movement that provided him with his first classroom teaching experiences in freedom schools in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1964. So take it away, Bob.
So good afternoon, everybody. I can't tell you what a joy it is to be here today because we happen to be in a period when, amongst other things, personal reflection is at an all-time high. Tomorrow, the Fullilove family will commemorate the 9th anniversary of the death of our son, Bobby Fullilove, in Tokyo. The idea that we led off the service with an expression that captures, I think, the essence of grace and what it means to be in the hands and in the spirit of grace. I think that having an opportunity to reflect on many years of my life where I've been involved with teaching persons who are incarcerated has been a moment when I get to actually witness firsthand what it is when someone, as a result of education, becomes engaged in an act that in the end will produce something that closely resembles redemption. Thinking about all the things that are happening at this moment in October, when memories of past events are often very, very powerful. Mindy Fullilove just celebrated her 75th anniversary as a person on planet Earth. Mindy Fullilove and I, on October 17th, 1989, were part of the San Francisco World Series earthquake. So as the baseball finals play out right now, recalling that many years ago, she and I were on the 5th floor of a building that shook so badly. It took 2 hours to get us out of the building, where we spent not only the night in Moscone Center with other people who'd been homeless, either because of the earthquake or because that's just how things were, and recalling that that was the night when we made the decision to come to New Jersey to be a part of Columbia University. So the idea that all of this sort of comes to a head at this moment, when I have been especially focused on the issue, what does it mean to have spent 15 years teaching public health courses in 6 New York State prisons as part of the Barred Prison Initiative? I know this is being recorded, so for those of you who are not present for my remarks, let me just say a little bit about BPI and why it offers a unique opportunity for us to sort of think through the issues that are so heavily involved in our version and our thoughts about restorative justice, when from Gaza to just about every corner of the planet, we see ourselves besieged with conflict, we see ourselves struggling with the aftermath of war, and we're trying to understand, is there a way out of it? Is there some way in which even the vast differences that seem to be characterizing life in the United States at this moment in history, will they ever be reconciled? And the idea that what we are looking for as we search for reconciliation is literally a moment of grace, a moment when, amongst other things, we can forgive each other our sins to each other, as well as the sins we've committed to ourselves. And in the moment when we wonder whether or not there is a way out, it is interesting to look back on the struggles of incarcerated men and women who are not simply in my classrooms in prison to get an education. They're in a quest for answers. It's an interesting notion to be in a quest for answers and to true education, to discover education rather, as a pathway through which answers might be found. Because it isn't so much that they're looking for what Einstein was looking for as a patent clerk in the offices of the folk who were doing all kinds of work in Bern, Switzerland, to identify patterns. The answer to his question, how is matter related to energy, allowed him to say equals mc squared, which is, of course, an answer of sort. But the men and women I'm engaged in aren't looking for a simple statement, a moment of truth, an expression of how reality works so that things become clarified, so that something in the way of an answer is produced. No, the quest for an answer for many of them is really a process. And what's the nature of the process? Well, how do I get from today to tomorrow? One of the most enduring observations I ever heard while being a participant in the graduation ceremonies that the Barred Prison Initiative has had every year for the last 20 some odd years, was when the superintendent of the Department of Corrections and Community Services said, you know, the biggest threat to the life of an inmate, it isn't violence, it's suicide. It's the recognition that you get to a place where you experience your life in terms that can only be described as the most extreme form of root shock imaginable. You are not connected to anything familiar. You're struggling to get to the next minute, and a moment will come when you realize you're going to have to get to the next minute for the next 20 years. And the question, how am I going to do that, seems to be a question without answer. So what you ultimately decide to do is just get out of the game altogether. The idea that a quest for answer is often a quest to have a process that allows you to engage in the world so that through that engagement, you find some way to the next moment, to the next screen. But you may also find your way to other answers like, what did I do to get here? What does it all mean to be locked up with these folks all around me? What sense am I supposed to make of this moment? And is there something out there that can help me shine a light on all the chaos that's so much a part of my life so that when that light shines, I see things with greater clarity? The idea that when a lot of young men in particular, who perhaps never finished high school, who struggled with issues of literacy, suddenly discover that they have the skill to open a book, to read an article, and through the process of reading, find something that looks like not just a way from here to there, but a complete escape. To have some of my students describe what it is to be so lost in the reading of something that they can literally forget where they are, that of all the ways in which many of them receive a moment of grace, it's that moment when you were so lost in the topic that you are exploring on the printed page that somehow or other, all the things that are surrounding you with so much chaos, drama, and God knows what, for a moment disappear. It's no longer occupying the most important parts of your cognitive material. You're someplace else. Many of my students who embrace the idea that one way to redemption is to be of service to the community, finding that being someone who's engaged in working to promote the public health of the community is just such an opportunity, a kind of redemption that comes because you are giving back to the community. You are rendering a service in a place where the service is really needed, that some act of forgiveness and maybe even grace is located somehow because in your actions, if you save a life, if you prevent an illness, if you give someone surcease at a moment when disease is haunting their facilities, is that not something that, for all intents and purposes, feels as if forgiveness for whatever it is that landed you behind bars? Many of the folk who embrace a career in public health want to be educators. These are the folk who are really interested in going into the community to deal with violence. Think about the reading that opened my comments. Thinking about violence, thinking about being in a community where there is permanent beef, where one act of violence demands that there be an act of response, that vengeance be served, that if an eye has been poked out, another eye has to be rendered in the process of getting something that looks like revenge. What happens when, in situations like that, the answer is not to be engaged in endless beef. The answer is not to give folks the skill to do the job of negotiating better. No, for many of them, the answer lies in what can we do to really heal the wounds that have been created by some act of violence, some act of criminal mischief, where not just have victims been produced, but maybe damage to the entire way in which the community functions is also at stake. When families get to be at war with each other, when it appears as if there will be no end to the retribution that is visited one group against the other, isn't the answer not something that is gotten through learning a new skill, but isn't it instead, once again, engaging in something that looks like a process, where the focus is literally on education? So what form of education goes into violence prevention? I'm working with two colleagues who are trying to put together just such a training program for violence interrupters, and it is essentially pursuing the form of restorative justice that is often being highlighted in many of the ways in which alternatives to incarceration and in turn and alternatives to policing are being pursued in New York City. Let me read you something from the internet, from Google, that sort of describes this whole process. Restorative justice works in the US, bringing together victims, offenders, and community members in a facilitated process to repair the harm caused by crime rather than just focusing on punishment. The process varies, but often involves meetings like victor offender mediation, family group conferences, or community reparative boards, which allow those affected to have a voice, discuss the impact of the crime, and determine how the offender can make amends. Why is this important? I've been around a lot of guys who say, I've been in some really hard places in my life. Having a judge tell me I'm going to spend 20 years in a joint like this, okay. But you ought to see where I'm from. I've seen hard times. I've been in hard places. And I've been around a bunch of people who are harder than the guys I'm doing time with. There was a point when I was kind of clear, I could do this. I could get from today to tomorrow. I could do 20 years. I could see it. I had strategies. I had ways of dealing with people. I understood the power that I was observing when I saw folk interacting with each other in the yard. And I knew I could do this. But there came a moment when I understood that while I was focusing on doing the time, I wasn't paying enough attention to what had happened as a result of my crime. Who were the people who were impacted? What did that look like? I heard someone describe what it was like to have taken someone's life and knowing full well who that person was after the fact and understanding, oh, whatever was in that moment, that's gone. But look at what's been left behind. Suddenly there's an awareness that there's a child that no longer has a parent. There's a family that's suffering something in the way of a vacuum. There's a hurt that's going to linger on because of the vacuum that's been created, the loss that has been engendered. And knowing somehow that I was engaged in that meant that there'd be no peace in simply doing time if somehow or other I'd simply get out into a world where the lingering after effects of what I'd done would be there to haunt me. When I was given the opportunity to meet with the family that I'd victimized through my act, when we got to sit down and sort of talk about what it was that led to the beef, why suddenly at that moment, he and I were face to face, and all of a sudden it was over, an act had been done. Like a lot of people on the inside, I was 18 when that happened. And age has only given me a sense that now that I see with older eyes what I did back then, the idea that I can't return, the whole thing that education has taught me, ooh, if I only knew then what I know now, yeah, that's come to haunt me. And all of a sudden in a meeting where I could literally say, I see what I did. I understand how it is hurt. And I need to not run away from what you're going to tell me about what it's meant to you to have me and your man be at such a point where he's gone and I'm still here. And then having to listen to detailed discussions of what it meant. There was a moment when we looked at each other and we kind of knew that we couldn't bring back that moment, but at least there was something that looked like, that felt like understanding. There was this like, okay, what was once a mystery, how did this happen? Well, I guess I know. And there was some peace in that moment. Not the abolition of the act, that still remains. Not the damage that was done. No, some of that will never be repaired. But at least there was a moment when I think what was restored to all of us was some sense that having understood the moment, we now can go on. The idea that so much of what restorative justice is about isn't just what happens as a result of two warring parties being reconciled. That sometimes what we're looking at are ways in which, when the community is involved in the act and their point of view is also taken into account, when some of the repair is the damage to community relations, the idea that this goes beyond simply what do we do between victim and victimizer. It has so much more to do with moments of community peace. It's interesting from a biblical standpoint to understand how the Old and New Testaments deal with this issue of justice, redemption, and grace. The Old Testament was basically all about Yahweh trying to tell Israel, here's who you are. Here's what it means to be my country, my chosen place. And here are the duties that have to be present in order for you to be really worthy to be a part of what I see as my creation. Whereas the Christian tradition was always Jesus trying to tell those who would hear his voice, I'm concerned about you and your role in the universe. And much of what I'm bringing to you is the word that allows you to find individual ways of reconciling your existence, your sins, and your grace with the larger plan that God put together for us all. God has accepted the fact that we are all sinners, that we live in a world of sin. But through my sacrifice, somehow or other, that part of who you are gets put to the side, and your job becomes, having been forgiven, can you come into a relationship with God that allows you to produce the kinds of good acts that advance the notion that we are not just here as individuals, we are also part of a larger community where what we do together is important as what each of us do individually to create community. The idea that restorative justice tries to bring together two notions of the nation's view of democracy and what it means to deal with acts of violence and criminal behavior in the midst of a democracy. Should we, about an eye for an eye, being clear that no crime goes unpunished? Should punishment be enough? Because 95% of our carceral facilities are so invested in punishment. The idea that some justice is being served, that some sort of redemption is happening, that some rehabilitation is somehow a part of the plan, that gets obscured. That doesn't get emphasized very much at all. But the idea that people on the inside are themselves seeking what peace, what grace, what justice can be uncovered, can be found through using restorative strategies where we understand our role, we understand our need to be reconciled, that we understand that from an awareness of what we did, to take responsibility means that perhaps one of the other things we can do is render service. If that service is to bring about peace in the community, then perhaps at least there is some way in which our act of violence has some kind of meaning that goes beyond who got hurt and starts to focus instead on what happened when we all came to understand that act. And as a result of that act, attempted something that looks like healing. I've always liked thinking about what it means to commit to a way of being in the universe that is about promoting restorative justice. I worry that in very much the spirit of an article that was written by Derek Thompson called The Antisocial Century, we are rapidly, because of technology, becoming a nation of bystanders, of observers. We feel now with Netflix and with all the things that stream that our job is to be observers of the patterns of life around us. We don't need to engage very much because there are so many weekends when we never have to leave our living rooms, and yet we feel connected in some important way to the universe. But what this has produced is a belief that if there is something to be done that promotes community, if there's something that allows us to reaffirm our humanity as social beings who are obligated to interact with each other, the idea that we are simply observing other people do this, but not participating ourselves in being engaged in the world, and as a result of that engagement, doing our part to restore whatever justice needs to be rendered in the communities where we live. No, the idea that what I learn and what I see from folk who are behind bars, who are pursuing restorative justice as a way they want to be in the world as public health educators, is also a call to all of us who are similarly being called to be more in life than observers, more in life than simple bystanders, but participants. Because only through participation, only through engagement, do we realize everything that is in all of our religious traditions that understands that we're not just in here to eat, to live, to function, and to survive. As social beings, we are connected to each other. And there are obligations that go to that connection. And we can't let the technology of the day blind us to the demand that those obligations place on us. Because if we heed the call that those obligations are issuing, then we're in the world, we're engaged, we're marching in No Kings, and we're making it clear we will not rest until the justice that is promised in the creation of a democratic republic is something that all of us are living through, the lives that we live, the actions that we take, and the engagements we have with other people. If there is some lesson to be learned from all this, it is that, isn't it an odd that some of the most important lessons about life in the real world, at least to me, came about as a result of engaging with folk who weren't in the real world at all. And as a result of being in another place, pursuing education in ways that it is almost impossible to imagine, they found their ways to answers that I think provide answers to all of us at a time in our history when we are surrounded by questions and aren't clear about where we need to go to get something that looks like resolution. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for those very wise and compassionate words. We do live in difficult times, so I appreciate your addressing that and talking about it. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I think we have to unpin Bob.
Well, everybody's on mute,
Oh, okay.
so
We can take them off.
first, I also want to say hi, Wayne. Hi, Becky. A few people came on. Welcome. Any questions or comments for Bob?
I'm a big fan of the 20-minute sermon, by the way.
Yeah, so are we.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I can jump in, if that's okay.
Sure.
Please.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much for that. It's just so incredibly moving, and I resonated very deeply with it, having, of course, been in spaces too where that kind of profound truth-telling is what is really being sought in the spaces of learning and in learning community. As you were talking, I was thinking of this connection you're drawing, particularly between public health and a kind of, I don't know, what we would call paideia, that sort of deep transformative learning, that is imagining this kind of a process, restorative justice, at a large scale. And of course, that made me think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process in South Africa, where you had these enormous convenings. The proceedings were broadcast on television in real time, so that the entire populace of the country could in fact witness this process. And there were many extraordinary, I think, moments that illustrated the effectiveness of the process, the restorative effectiveness of the process, which wasn't to say that a kind of peace descended. Grace is not necessarily calm. It can be very fraught and with deep and profound grief. The sounds of some of those testimonials were, they echo with me today, that you can't imagine what that was like. Today, some decades later, the conversation that I'm aware of that's happening in South Africa on the ground as you go back to truth and reconciliation, I think moves more in the direction of something like reparation. And that makes me too think of a kind of public health framework of what moves out of these moments that you've shared with us, these incredible moments of self-reflection, but then also a kind of collective or community engagement that then calls on us for a kind of much larger social imagining, which I think public health is also about. That really has to do with the big question of how we structure our society as a whole. And, you know, what does something like reparations look like within this framework? Is that the point to which is this how this plays out within a kind of public health framework and on a scale like this? South Africa did not do it very well. And I think this is why a kind of bitterness has begun to settle over the history of that moment. There was a kind of deep emotional catharsis that came with it. But in terms of the enduring and long-term transformation of people's lives and their possibilities, there has been felt to be a kind of failure. And I think there's something for us to learn from that, that is a real contribution to restorative justice.
I would agree. The examples that surge from the Bible about restorative justice all do cite giving up all that you own. Zacharias giving up half of what he owns to the poor and promising to make amends for all the people that he cheated. Old Testament and New Testament, you get the same thing, the idea that you owe the slave that you freed some income and some way of literally acknowledging the pain he endured under you by providing him with something that physically restores him if the emotional damage is not able to be completely repaired. 40 acres and a mule is what was, of course, supposed to be attached to the end of slavery and the emancipation, a recognition that you kidnapped labor to build the country, and if labor is compensated, doesn't this also deserve, at the very least, something that acknowledges not just the wrong, but also acknowledges that with the wrong, a debt was incurred, and that debt requires that it be paid, not with lip service, but something concrete, something physical. And at a moment when we're dealing with sort of capitalism on steroids, the idea that so many people voted because they thought people who didn't deserve it were getting unfair benefit from the dollars that they were given to the federal government. So of course you can cut off government, because what did it ever do for me? I don't care if people are losing their jobs, can't pay their bills or stuff like that, because I've been struggling with no job and I've been trying to pay off bills without enough money. So now everybody gets to share in my suffering. I mean, it's the exact opposite, I think, of what is certainly being called for in all the religious traditions that understand that some healing occurs because you not just recognize the wrong, you physically manifest it through your actions, something that is an attempt to pay it off. But of all the things to sell at this point in the 21st century in contemporary capitalistic America, I think that's the hardest sell of all. And one that may have all kinds of right behind it, but not the might to actually have it insured, to have it actually happen. And that, of course, is a reason for more than just a little bit of sadness, because who knows what the way out is going to ultimately look like or what it'll ultimately be. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that the thing that you and I often share is the profound sense of watching this happen, and you can't be indifferent to it. The idea that you are the teacher somehow seems to almost obligate you to be somewhat distant from it all, and suddenly discovering that that can't be possible, that the most important thing you can do is engage with them in the quest. Because if both of you are looking for something that looks like the same thing, the idea that you're more likely to succeed becomes that much a part of it. Yeah, your smile tells me that, yeah, you feel that too. That it is something, because I'm going to Fishkill tomorrow to start back, you know. It's good to have an opportunity to talk about it in this way when I actually wind up driving up to a joint tomorrow to actually do it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob and Robert. I also appreciate you chiming in on this. You opened by saying it's a moment of personal reflection, and certainly the as you describe it, this experience of teaching in the 6 upstate prisons, which have been so devoted to over 15 years, that you drive hours and hours and hours each way, and week after week after week. And, you know, the sort of, so what has that meant for you? How have you been changed by, and to some extent, catalyzing this process, which is transformative for others? Things, you know, the sort of reflection of their transformation, how do you think it has led to your own transformation?
I like talking about this stuff in a mainstream graduate setting at a place like Columbia University, because at this moment, folk want to know that there are things that represent individual agency that have something in the way of an actual tangible return. So being in a setting where I can point to people who are sitting in the class who 2 years earlier were sitting inside a prison listening to me talk about public health renders more concrete the notion that some of what we do does produce concrete results. And sometimes at a moment when you are closest to despair, you need to be reminded that some of what you do does actually result in a victory of sorts. I mean, I think it's been very helpful to me to have the sense that having invested all that time, I can actually point to something and say, oh, I did that. And as a result of that, you don't feel something in the way of invigoration. I mean, I'm an old guy. And having at my age something that gives me the reason to believe that it's still worth getting up every day, it's still worth going out and doing what I got to do, because there are still returns on that investment of time and energy that I value. Being able to say that about myself and being able to model it for folk in a classroom, many of whom are also there because they too have had the experiences I've had, and they're trying to figure out, what do we do together? What is a consolidated effort on the part of folk in public health or medicine that can actually make a difference, so that what doesn't happen inside of a prison in the way of rehabilitation can somehow happen as a result of what we do together with people who are home, having done time in a prison, but who want to work with us in communities to promote a public health agenda. I think knowing that that's an actual thing that you can say, that it's something you can lead people to, giving people some outlet so that having told them that this is all possible, now you can actually go out and do something about it. Yeah, I think that's been really transformative, and it's been very, very rewarding. I'd say that I've gotten more out of it than maybe everybody I've actually been in contact with. And, it's one of the reasons why I continue to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
I just, I spent quite a few years working as a probation officer, and then I was with the Department of Corrections as a youth advocate. And the focus at the time that I was with corrections was to eventually see Jamesburg and the youth prisons closed, and that the community would take on the responsibility of the rehabilitation or the habilitation or the caring for the people, the young people and the families who were involved in the juvenile justice system. And it was back in the 80s when I worked there. And then in graduate school, I was at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. And it was just then that the governor signed the order to close those facilities, and it still hasn't happened. That so the facilities have officially stated that they wanted to close. The government has stated that they want to close, but the process of getting that done and bringing people to a point where they can benefit from. I mean, it just seems like the restorative justice thing happens on a one-to-one basis, on a one-to-one engagement, more than it does in a group setting. I see what you're saying about the public health issue, but I'm wondering how does this actually, in reality, how does it come about? Does someone necessarily have to say, I'm open to grace. I am open to receiving, to changing before any of it can happen? Or is it possible that there could be, a structure in place that would help to facilitate that kind of restorative sense for people who are incarcerated?
In community restorative boards, you might be dealing with violence in a community that's gang related. There, you're not just talking about individuals having beef with each other. Now you're talking about something that often has history, that has geography, and it's more than just one individual, so that all the
Right.
people who are a part of maintaining this ongoing warfare can be brought to the table. And there are moments when people are going to admit they're really tired of it. That not only have they seen it go on and on and on, but the idea is that there's never any answer. There's just another act that requires something in the way of retribution. What I am constantly amazed by is people telling me stories of folk arriving at a table so exhausted by all that they have had to do just to be in the community while all this was going on, that the palpable relief that comes when on the other side folks say, we're tired of this too. And at that moment, there's something that looks like awareness. I mean, it's all the moments of grace that people in the pulpit talk about all the time. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens maybe even rarely, but it does happen. And as long as it happens, we are a community of faith. And what drives us is not the proof that the strategies we engage in work, that every time we try it, we get success. No, faith means that we're in a struggle. And the struggle may never have a resolution. It may never have an end. But what it does have is a process. And being engaged in that process is how we feel our humanity. And when there's that moment when God smiles at us and says, okay, y'all have had enough. Let me just fix this. I think one feels renewed. And as a sense that, 1 out of 10 is not a bad batting average, in the face of 0 for 10,000.
Yeah.
So let me go for the next time. And I mean, I love it that, it is what keeps folk like me reasonably optimistic at a moment when we're surrounded by so many things that make us sad, depressed, and unappreciated. I don't know. I think it's always glad to hold on to moments like that because they do sustain us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, I very much appreciated that opening citation, that opening reference. We did not plan that, but I couldn't have asked for a better way of introducing what I had to say than that, because it captured all what I thought were the absolute key points. And, typically when pastors work with everybody on the sermon committee to figure out how stuff is going to done, that we sort of threw all this together. It was a joy sort of thinking about this and prepping for it. And I felt that my moment of grace was when you opened with something that so perfectly set the stage. I felt saying what I had to say was that much easier.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you.
Nice.
It was as soon as I saw it, I knew that was what we wanted to talk about. So thank you, Bob.
Yes, I also would say what you're talking about really exemplifies faith plus works. Our words here. So you're a real role model and an inspiration. So thank you again for speaking. And thank you all to our listeners. If you enjoyed what you heard, I hope you'll tell people about it, share. This will be posted on YouTube in a few days, and I hope you will join us again in November next month when we will have another wonderful program. Frank, would you like to extinguish the chalice?
Absolutely. Your closing words?
Few closing words. Trembling with joy, the great sea has set me in motion, set me adrift, moving me like a weed in a river. The sky and the strong wind have moved the spirit inside me till I am carried away, trembling with joy. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bob, thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great to see
Bye.
you.
Thanks for joining. Good
See
seeing
you.
you, Robert,
Yes, good to see everybody.
Wayne,
Becky,
Becky.
Wayne,
Thanks, Doug,
and
Frank. Hi, Becky. Hi, Wayne.
See you all